Charles Heidsieck's acclaimed Blanc de Millénaires has earned cult status amongst those lucky enough to have tried it. It's mineral and pure, playing more to the soil than the sunshine, but finding its balance here too. Only Chardonnay taken from 5 Grand Cru in the Côte de Blanc is used in this effortlessly delicious and smoothly textured champagne of euphoric wonder. Longley's aging in Charles's heritage-listed Crayère produces these champagnes with a velvety texture and creamy richness without being yeasty, aromatically reminiscent of its chalky origins and astonishingly fresh. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Charles's Executive Director Stephen Leroux as part of a world-first taste of the surprising release of Blanc de Millénaires 1996, as well as the newest release from 2014. So Stephen, welcome. It's great to speak with you again. You're here in Australia to launch 2 incredible Blanc de Millénaires from Charles Heidsieck, one of which is from the lauded 1996 vintage in a world first taste that will no doubt be incredibly exciting for champagne lovers all over the world. I feel that Blanc de Millénaires sits at a level that is aspirational for champagne winemakers, but also champagne lovers. It seems to be that holy grail of all that is wonderful and mysterious, but also what you would want to expect from a very fine Blanc de Blanc. It consistently represents equal proportions of Côte de Blanc, Grand and Premier Crus, Avis, Cremant, Le Mesnil-sur-Oger, Oger, Vertu. Very Longley's aging, finished off with a moderate dosage. So what is the history of Charles's emblematic Blanc de Millénaires, and what particular stylistic aspiration does it have?
I'm just happy to be here with you today in Adelaide and to be back in Australia for a nice tour after a week in Singapore also. Yeah, we are very happy to launch Blanc de Millénaires 1996. To be honest, we're launching the 2014, which is a new release. That's on the commercial range, a classic. And 96 is more like a collection, little surprise, because until very recently, we were not sure that we would release the 1996. And it's been a long decision process over the years to be sure that this wine would be ready for the consumers. So to answer your question, Blanc de Millénaires is first and foremost the vision of Daniel Thibault, who was the chef de cave of Charles Heidsieck in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, etc., and passed away very early in 2002. He had the vision that Charles should produce the most pure, the most mineral Blanc de Blanc from the Côte de Blanc. The company was producing Blanc de Blanc already at the back of the 19th century. So we were probably the first champagne house to produce Blanc de Blanc. We have records of Blanc de Blanc vintage from Le Mesnil in 1906. We were producing Blanc de Blanc non-vintage in the 1950s and 60s. That stopped for some political reasons due to the acquisition of Charles Heidsieck by a big company in the 1980s. But at that time, Daniel Thibault had already had the vision of producing a very, very pure Blanc de Blanc called Blanc de Millénaires. So that happened in 1983. So before that, Blanc de Blanc vintage was an ongoing wine. Blanc de Millénaires became more extraordinary and much more of all the time. Every time it was launched, it was an event. So 1983 was the first one, followed by 85, 95, 2004, 6, 7, and now 14. So only 8 released in 40 years. So I guess the purest expression of the Blanc, Côte de Blanc, it's almost like if you were blending, all the top crus of Burgundy, Cortot, Batamont, Rachet, Verso, Puligny, and with some bottles, so the expression of all the diversity of the Côte de Blanc Grand Crus, including one Premier Cru, Vertu, which should be Grand Cru, or if it was rated again today, from scratch, it would probably have the classification Grand Cru. But that's in a nutshell, the story and the vision of the Blanc de Millénaires.
Because I feel that the Blanc de Millénaires does have a very different style to other Blanc de Blanc that is out there. It really has its own feeling, expression, emotion. I think that when people drink it, they know it's different to everything else out there. So how would you describe that difference between, what is, I guess, commercially available with other maisons versus what is available with Charles Heidsieck?
Difficult question, because really in the end, it's down to everyone and the palates to describe and to appreciate that wine. But I would say what's interesting with Charles Heidsieck Blanc de Millénaires is that the recipe is very, very constant since the beginning. It has always been a combination of the 5 crus of the Côte de Blanc. You named them Leroux, Avis, Cremant, Oger, Le Mesnil, and Vertu. Almost 20% each, more or less, could be 19%, 21, etc. So again, I think it's the classic blending characteristic of Charles Heidsieck, which is what we're very well known for. We're known first and foremost as maybe one of the master blenders in the champagne history to produce great non-vintage wines, particularly brut non-vintage. I think the Blanc des Millénaires is the blending expertise of Charles year after year, and having to find sometimes, because of course we have to have a great vintage to produce the Blanc des Millénaires. But then the plots of grapes might not be always the same. The blend by village is roughly the same, but where the grapes come from might differ. Even in Crabant, it might be different plots according to the vintages. So it's that kind of consistency throughout the blend, which is what we're looking for. I don't really want to compare ourselves versus others because I have too much respect for my competitors to say anything wrong, but I'd rather focus on what we do.
Yeah, of course. So talking about the release of the Blanc des Millénaires 2014, which is only just coming to market now, and it's really exciting to see. It is a beautiful vintage, as I was talking to you earlier before. It's an oceanic year. It really favours Chardonnay. There's some beautiful, elegant, pretty Chardonnays, I think, out of this particular vintage. You touched on the fact that this is now the 8th edition of the Blanc des Millénaires that has been released to date. Prior to this, there was a 2007 release. There's a long time between drinks, so to speak, between that and 2014 and now. So why so long?
Yeah. Well, previously there had been a 9-year gap between 1995 and 2004. So this gap is only 7 years, if I may say so. There's always very good reasons, and I could spend, a solid hour explaining them one by one. But basically, the company was sold by Rémy Cointreau to EPI, the company of Monsieur Descours, who thankfully bought Charles Heidsieck in 2011. And, between 2007 and 2014, something happened called the subprime crisis and the global financial crisis with Lehman Brothers going bust. And, big problem in the champagne business. At that time, Rémy Cointreau, before they sold the company, they were focusing on getting Charles because, they were getting the bride ready for sale. So one big decision they made, and I have to thank them for that, was to decide to produce Charles Brut non-vintage in the new bottle shape, and also to refine a little bit the blend, which was done by Thierry Roset. As a consequence, a lot of non-vintage was produced from the harvest 2007 and 2008. In 2009, frankly, nobody had any money. And Rémy Cointreau wanted to get, rid of Charles Heidsieck. So, by the time the company was bought in late 2011, 2012, we get our act together. We think about the new positioning, the branding, all that makes a business floating. And then, we did not have the money to blend 2013 or at 12, which could have been a good opportunity to blend Blanc des Millénaires. We actually kept some Chardonnay to produce our new non-vintage. But basically, one and all together, we could not do everything. So we had to wait until 2014 to produce the next one. So it's always a conjunction of climatical reason, economical reason. For us, it was probably more economical reason at that time because the company was selling practically zero after having been in the top 4 30 years before. So we really had to think about what our future was going to be. So all of a sudden, it's 2014. So that's why the gap.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So 2014 release of the Blanc des Millénaires has unusually seen the hands of 3 chefs de cave with Charles Heidsieck. So this is really interesting. So harvest and the base wines from the 2014 were managed at the discretion of former chef de cave Thierry Roset, who unfortunately passed away shortly thereafter. Then it was blended by Cyril Brun in the spring of 2015 and cellared until spring 2023. However, disgorged at that same time as well?
No, that was disgorged in 23.
In 23, okay. So Elise Losfeld, your current chef de cave, of course, made that decision, decided on the dosage. And so this is a really interesting offering, I think. And probably, if you're looking at it, maybe a little bit of an emotional and a romantic one to see such a special release. So talk us through 2014 and what do you think makes it so worthy of being called a Blanc des Millénaires?
You said emotion, and it is quite, even for me, because I was appointed by EPI at the end of 2012. So I started my job with Charles in 2013, realizing that the company had lost about 95% of their sales within 25 years, 95% drop in sales. So you're almost down to zero. And that was the context globally. And that's why we had little money, to be honest. I had obviously been appointed, and I was acquainted with Thierry Roset, who was the chef de cave. He was appointed as chef de cave just a year before, like in 2012. So obviously we are going to work together for years and years. Okay. And we had a great relationship. Unfortunately, Thierry passed away just after the harvest of 2014. And that was just time enough for he and I to basically kind of decide that 2014 would become Blanc des Millénaires. So one of my last memories with Thierry was discussing about his latest travel in the vineyard. I did some with him to see some growers. And he was saying, "Oh, Stephen, I think the Chardonnay of 2014 is of the magnitude that we should produce Blanc des Millénaires." And I remember having that discussion on a Friday. We were just having a sandwich just outside my office on the grass and a bowl of sparkling wine, some sparkling water. Just a break, a lunch break. And it was a Friday afternoon, and on a Sunday, he passed away. And that was the day before celebrating the 40th anniversary of the EPI Group, Monsieur Descours family company. And he was supposed to present Charles, and I had to do that alone. So it was rough times. So he basically, so his role was to identify the potential of 14 and start selecting some of the crews, which of course are almost kind of the same, but he was identifying some plots. The wine was actually made by the winemaking team of Charles Heidsieck. So it was a group of people who were working with the chef de cave. Cyril arrived kind of May, so the blending was done already, but he sort of, course, gave his blessing to that blend. Cyril left in 2022, and Elise came on board in 2023. And she basically worked on the dosage. So it's been definitely a team effort of many people around all those years, which is why it's so emotional.
It's a remarkable, wine to be created by three incredible people.
And it's the saga of what a great champagne house is. It's about transmission.
Yes.
Sometimes the transmission can be a little bit quick, but that's the story of champagne houses. And definitely this Blanc de Millénaires is an extraordinary example of collaboration between people and nobody really taking ownership of it, which is great.
So we just finished off a tasting now, my first tasting of the 2014 Blanc de Millénaires, and 14, just to give people a little bit of context about the weather and the climatic conditions. 2014 had early flowering. The weather was particularly cool and humid at the beginning of summer. Very warm weather came in and lasted until about September. Chardonnays all around were incredibly good, and everything I've tasted so far from 2014, irrespective of producer, has been absolutely outstanding if it's been Chardonnay-led. But the Chardonnays are leaning more toward the riper side of the spectrum for sure. And 2014, as I mentioned before, is definitely an oceanic year which favoured Chardonnay. So, would you like to describe what you see in the glass when you taste the 2014 Blanc de Millénaires?
Yes, thank you for saying most of what I think I could have said so well at 14, because you've really summarized it in a very proper way. Right now, of course, the wine is still quite young. I mean, it's been released after 9 years. Well, let's face it, it's 3 times the appellation rules for vintage. It's the kind of classic launch period for Charles, for Blanc de Millénaires between 8 and 10 years when we launched them. 14, obviously today, they're still very young. I find it's not the citrusy side. It's not super acidic. It's quite generous, already opulent. So I would say kind of orangey, grapefruity style, more than citrusy. So it has some ripeness already. It's very fruity. And, we tasted it earlier on. And when you open it, within 10 minutes, you already have preliminary second aromas. I mean, it's coming step by step. You don't have the honey yet, but you're not very far from baked. I think one of us mentioned sourdough. It's coming around, and the only thing is, from a commercial point of view, we have, for some reasons, I think I was referring before in terms of, how much we could bottle. This is going to be a very small bottling, and we are supposed to sell that wine for about 2 years, meaning that we will probably sell twice less, if not more, in the whole world in 1 year. So 2024 and 5 will have limited allocations of this vintage, unfortunately. But it's one definitely to stand for and to hold. I think my suggestion, of course, it's not to put some kind of pressure on the market, but I would suggest, wine lovers, whether they are retailers or fine wine collectioners or restaurateurs, to buy that wine and not really wait, because otherwise there's a risk that will not be any more.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Yeah, I definitely noticed with the 2014, there was just this beautiful silkiness too on the palate, which I thought was, really, saying to us that it's starting to opening up right now. And this is indicative of that vintage. I think it's one of those ones that will come to our palates a little bit sooner and very easy to drink.
Has come within, with us not even realizing it, because 6 months ago, the silkiness was not here. And within 6 months, posted as gorging, the silkiness aspect has started to come.
Yeah.
And that's not very far away from the element of texture, which is a word so important for us in Charles, whichever the wine.
Absolutely part of your DNA. So moving on, today you surprised us with the release of the 1996 Blanc de Millénaires that no one saw coming. When previously probed, you have been very careful in your language not to commit to the 1996 release, never really confirming nor denying its existence. Very clever. But obviously a decision was made at some point that you were going to do it and that it was ready to come out to market. And I remember once Cyril Brun saying that, there comes a moment in time whereby the wine stops acting like a Blanc de Blanc and starts acting like a Blanc de Millénaires. So 1996, of course, is one of the most acclaimed vintages in Champagne's history, characterised by very high acidity, good ripeness, intense flavour, concentration. It's been a long time for Champagne to come out of their shell, so to speak, from this vintage. So I'm wondering if you can explain some of the considerations and decisions that went into finally releasing the 1996.
Yeah, this is quite an extraordinary journey, personally for me and for the wine and the company, because I joined the Charles Heidsieck in 2013 January, and I of course at that time we were selling quite significant quantities of the 1995, which has been the illustrious vintage of Blanc de Millénaires, produced by Daniel Thibault. I think people know roughly the story. It's been echoed in the press before. He was authorized to produce a certain amount of bottles, and he doubled that amount, taking his own responsibility. And thank God he did it. So we enjoyed selling this wine from 2012 up to 2016, 17, roughly, because our previous owners were not very good at selling prestige champagne. So that was good for us because we really took market share from day one with Blanc de Millénaires 95. And with our Brut non-vintage, which is a multi-reserve vintage, Brut of high quality and consistency. That was really the two weapons for us to kick off Charles and the new platform. And when I joined the company, I looked at the inventory, of course, and I discovered that Charles Heidsieck had produced 96 Blanc de Millénaires. I mean, to be honest, I was sure they had done because it was at least the whole of Champagne acclaimed. But of course, then I realized the number of bottles in stock of the 95. So then I saw the level of stock of 96, and only about 30,000 bottles had been produced, versus something like 400,000 bottles of 95. And that's when I said to Thierry Roset, Thierry, when are we launching 96? Because I was excited about what it was. I had sold 96 in my previous champagne houses before. And he said, Stephen, let's take it easy, get into Charles and we'll discuss that later on. I said, okay, fine. So I remember tasting 96 for the first time, Charles Blanc de Millénaires, in about September of 2013. And we tasted a few bottles. And I would say, to be very honest, the wine was a little bit uneven. And from a quality point of view, if 95 was on 100 index points, 96 would be maybe 95%. I mean, come on, this is great, right? But for Charles, maybe not great.
Not good enough.
That's what Thierry said. Although I was heading the company already, the chef de cave always comes first in terms of authority and what we sell, what we don't sell. But we agreed that we would continue tasting that wine step by step. So we tasted it again in 2014. Then, of course, as I said earlier on, he passed away. In 2015, when Thierry came on board, we continued tasting that wine, and I was beginning to make myself belief. And I think, we're still a bit staying secret on that, but I had my own belief. Then Elise came on board about a year ago. And the first thing I did was to taste, of course, quite a few bottles with her. I mean, not many, because as I told you, there's not many in the stock, but we had to make some serious experiments. And we tasted randomly 3 or 4 times, at least 10 bottles. And the index was getting close to 98, 99% in our minds. So we then had that tasted by the winemaking committee with all the people who were involved at some stage. And everybody was green flag. So, and that's why I say it's a bit of a personal project.
Yes.
I could see that coming through. I didn't have the evidence. And what we did with Cyril is we disgorged the wine in 2021. And when Elise came, she gave her approval for selling that wine, basically putting her name as a new chef de cave on the wine.
That was ready for release.
Hugely thought for by the collectioners. So we're very happy to bring this wine. It's very tiny quantities. There's only a few hundred cases for the whole world. We're going to sell most of it this year, maybe a few bottles next year, and then that'll be done. People who come to Charles, maybe in 10 years and 20 years, we might keep one pallet, because I think it's nice, but that's what it is. It's down to very limited numbers. And we're so happy to show that wine, which is honestly showing the classic characteristics of 96, which is high levels of acid. But with the years, I think you're talking a quarter of a century of aging on least. Now this acid is just serving at the service of the expression of the wine. And honestly, it's a great wine to drink from that. I think it can still age. It was disgorged 21, dosage about 9 grams, and it's a true expression of 96.
Yes, so almost a quarter of a century basically maturing in your cellars, and 3 years post-disgorgement maturation, which has really, I think, integrated the wine beautifully. We tasted it just now, and, I mentioned to you that the 1996 vintage can be a little bit like Russian roulette. It was such a lauded vintage. Everybody went crazy for it. It got released, in my opinion, too early in a lot of cases. And so people have been let down. It hasn't really stacked up to all of its acclaim. But I think that the really wise decision to hold it back and just allow it to bubble away in the surface has made all the difference, because this is an outstanding wine that really captivated your audience today. And it is really at that point, as you say, the acidity has been absorbed into that long maturation period on lees, and now it's not separate. The acidity is not separate to the actual wine, which has been the case for so many other 96 releases. It stands separate, which is not the way it should be. It should be a complete wine. You know, harmony and integration is there in this one at the moment. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, that's why we've waited for so long. I mean, 96, if I'd like to make a comparison, 96 in Champagne for winemakers is a bit like giving a Formula One to somebody who's just got his driving license. You know, you have no experience, and all of a sudden you're driving a Formula One, with everything that is extreme. You know, 96 is perfect that example. Unfortunately, the company had to dispatch some of that stock about 15 years ago before the acquisition by ABI, which is why there's only such a small amount left. But again, that was quality winemaking decision before sales. Yeah. It could have been quite sexy to sell 96 already 10 years ago, you know, the one 15 years old. But we said, no, definitely not. And remember, Charles Heidsieck, you know, we take that kind of decision sometime. 35 years ago already, 89 was sold before 88.
Yes.
2006 rosé was sold before 2005 rosé. So we're not a newcomers to that kind of decision. And frankly, it is so, isn't it romantic to all of a sudden when people think there's no, Charles Heidsieck never produced Blanc in 96, which is commonly alleged. And finally, by the way, guys, we're releasing some 96 Blanc des Millénaires. Come on, Stephen, you've been playing tricks at us. And when I was asked the question, you know, people often ask me, was Blanc des Millénaires 96 released? And I said, no. Does it mean was it produced or not produced? I was kind of, you know.
That's what I was saying. You're very clever with the semantics of your words. Very, very well played. And very sensibly too, a bit of a lower dosage applied to this one, around 9 grams a litre, which I think marries very nicely with the maturation of this wine. The profile of this wine, just everything you would expect from Charles. It marries all of that incredible development with this scintillating energy that always comes through with every single one of your champagnes. I noted things like, you know, some spices, so saffron, pecans, warm butter, candied mandarin, those sorts of things. A little bit of that smokiness as well coming through, not too much. It's just all these incredible layers of complexity combined into one. But texturally, it's there. And that really is the hallmark, I think, of Charles, is texture always.
Yeah. What came as an evidence this morning as we were tasting the wine is that, okay, I know how to describe the wine. I mean, my emotion is like, a tarte au citron by Leroux.
Yes.
It's sort of a creamy and sweet and concentrated apparel. And on top of which you have some yuzu. So you have and you have also the pasta of the tart. So you have all the elements, the sourdough of the pasta. You have the texture and the creaminess of the curd. And you have some freshness, which I would describe maybe some yuzu notes, green lemon. And that came all into one as I was tasting this morning. Then of course, after a few minutes, the wine gets a bit warm. You might get like tertiary aromas like that of a polished wood. But I think the freshness, the salinity, it's, you know, I was saying it was a bit of a laughter, but it's almost like a muscadet. It's so fresh. It still feels so young. Yeah. But then, of course, the complexity is way above, you know, definitely.
It's a grand wine. It's a grand wine. It's absolutely outstanding, and how lucky we are to have tasted it. So if I was playing devil's advocate, I would think that perhaps these extended periods of time for Blanc de Millénaire might become part of Charles's future to appeal to more collectors. And of course, your lauded 1995 Blanc de Millénaire that you talked about came to market with around 15 years or so on lees and caused a huge amount of excitement amongst wine collectors worldwide. So are you able to say if we're going to see more of these extensively aged gems into the future?
The commitment by Charles, we have a charter, a charte œnologique is 8 years at least. That's the minimum. Generally speaking, we are around 9 years when we release the new wines, roughly. Of course, you know, we are working step by step towards the future of that company. Remember, that company was, the company of the business or the brand was kind of dead in 2012. Okay. It had been neglected. Today, without arrogance, but with keeping some modesty, you know, Charles is back big time. You know, we have positioned the brand worldwide as a niche, as a boutique winery. We know exactly who our competitors are. We know who our competitors are not. We are obsessed with one thing, which is quality and perception, positioning. What is quite reassuring for me as a businessman is that the shareholder, Monsieur Descours, has never put pressure on me to grow Charles to a certain size and volume. The brief is very simple. Say, obviously, make America great again, make Charles great again. That's the brief.
Yeah.
So, and that takes a lot of different ingredients. We are working to be able to step by step increase the aging on lees of most of the wines, not the non-vintages, because we are releasing them at the optimal time now. We have come back to exactly what we want, but the vintages and prestige cuvées will enjoy within the next 10, 20 years, more and more times on lees. It's going to happen very, very progressively, and that's my job to secure that and for the future. But currently, New Blanc de Millénaires, 9 years of age, and 96 is the conundrum. Nobody knew that. So, of course, this is a few hundred cases of collection wines. We will still be doing that. As a matter of fact, every year, we're selling wines under the name Collection Crière. That could be some Champagne Charlie, some vintage, some Blanc de Millénaires that we have kept for all these years behind, sometimes 20, 30, 40 years. So we sell a few bottles every year. So we are doing that already. But your question was more on the general offering of Blanc de Millénaires. That will come step by step. We might go to 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, maybe one day, 15 years. But I'm not sure of that because, time on lees is a big subject that we have with the Chef de Cave, and the patterns of winemaking in Champagne are changing a little bit. It's more easy to make Champagne over the past 20 years. And God knows what aging on lees will be in 10, 15 years from a winemaking point of view. So that's a bit soon to be conclusive on that.
Well, very well and politically said. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for the opportunity to taste through these historically significant champagnes. It's been an absolute delight, and they are already delivering, I think, on that Blanc de Millénaires promise, that we all expect. And I really thank you for that. And I want to wish you all the very best for the remaining time that you have in Australia.
Thank you, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to be here in Australia, a land of much love for Charles Heidsieck and such fans and appreciation. It's very warm-hearted. And thank you very much for your consistent effort of promoting the whole of Champagne. We are very fortunate as a region to have people like you endorsing our call.
Oh, my pleasure, always. Thank you. Wine & Bubble is a boutique and independent information source dedicated exclusively to telling the real story of Champagne. It was launched by me, Sarah Underdown, in November 2018, after almost a decade of working in the champagne industry as a recognised writer, educator and presenter. Wine & Bubble brings together a network of Australian wine journalists, sommeliers, educators and industry representatives as regular contributors. As a team of champagne lovers and communicators, we are thrilled to share our united passion with wine-loving audiences. To read more about Champagne, to subscribe to events in Australia and learn more about opportunities to join us for experiences in Champagne, visit vineandbubble.com and register your details.